Hello?
Well, we're going to talk now about the Manipur Appeal, recently launched by the Presbyterian Church of Wales. And I'm delighted to be joined by the Reverends Powell-Davies and Rebecca Lalbiaksangi. So, welcome to you both. You've both recently returned from Mizoram, which is a neighbouring country to Manipur, and we'll talk a little bit about why Mizoram and not Manipur. But Nan, I wonder if you could start off with why is this so important to you and to us as a people?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gethin. So, first of all, maybe it's important for us to understand, how do we belong to each other? And I think, certainly that link goes back to the days of John Roberts and that calling we had as God's people here in Wales and the Presbyterian Church of Wales. We were called to come out of what was called the London Missionary Society, going back 195 years ago. And we were called to go and share the gospel in north-east India, that arm of India that is sandwiched between Myanmar and Bangladesh. So we were called initially, and Thomas Jones, nearly 185 years ago, landed in Cherrapunji, which is now back to its original name, Zora, in the state of Meghalaya. And that's where our mission started. And really the rest is history, because the day we set foot in Meghalaya, the Khasi Hills in Cherrapunji, we covenanted with those people. We covenanted with the people that were of different tribes in northeast India, different languages. And soon after, about 50 years later, the gospel went from the Khasi Hills to the state of Mizoram, or the Lushai Hills at the time. And we, as a church, placed one of our missionaries, the Revd Jones, in 1897 in Mizoram. And within literally 12 years, the first revival broke out in the Khasi Hills and then in Mizoram. And when that revival broke, the Mizos, and Rebecca being a Mizo, and when the revival broke, it was just like the place went on fire. And following that, there was revival after revival, and that kind of urge, like John Roberts and Thomas Jones had experienced, but that urge, God is calling and we must respond. And the Mizos from Mizoram then went and shared the gospel with their own people in the neighbouring areas, being the Chin Hills in Myanmar. Of course, they understand the same language, predominantly Mizo, but various smaller clans within that tribe. And also up north, so to the east to the Chin Hills, and up north then to the state of Manipur as we know it today, and share the gospel. And therefore, the rest following that, after that revival in 1906 in Mizoram, the rest really is history. And we've seen over 100 years of the gospel becoming central to the life. And whenever I go back to Mizoram, we're reminded of, a vibrant church where the Holy Spirit is still moving and working. Presbyterian Church of India in Mizoram is the second biggest employer, for example, in Mizoram. Over 90% of the population are Christians, and up to very recently you would see at least half of the population worshipping every Sunday. Sundays look very differently in these wonderful states.
The idea of a covenant is really powerful, I think, Nan. That suggests a connection between Wales and that part of the world, which is, from what you say, quite permanent. You know, this is something we can't walk away from.
And that's why, of course, you know, when we launched the appeal and when we saw what was happening in Manipur and that desperation that we felt, that's why we covenanted again in prayer. And that's why we launched the prayer appeal quite immediately once the troubles broke out. Now, of course, we've also launched this financial appeal because, you know, we've got so many displaced families from Manipur and they need to rebuild their lives. And that's our aim.
So in May 2023, I think it was, there was this sudden violent upheaval in Manipur, which resulted in the Kuki people having to flee, run for their lives. And so this appeal is a response to the plight of these people. Do you want to say something maybe about how that violent unrest has left the people who the Kuki people who've left Manipur?
Well, we will see during the appeal, and we'll be looking at certain individuals. We will be looking at Kim Day, we'll be looking at Robert and others as well, and we will see literally the way they had minutes to flee their home, you know, where they belong, where they've belonged since birth, and they had to gather everything together and just flee. And of course the unrest, we've seen, you know, hundreds of churches being burnt, thousands of homes, whole villages were burnt, utterly burnt. People have lost their lives, hundreds of people have lost their lives. But their main concern was, of course, making sure that, you know, the vulnerable ones, children, elderly people and so on, you know, arrived a place of refuge. And that's what we saw in Mizoram, was one of those camps that people had been displaced. And the one thing that's very difficult for us to understand, certainly from the perspective of the way we welcome the other in our country, and the way government and the way power looks at people that are being displaced within our own structures. It's very difficult for us to comprehend, you know, a neighbouring state telling not only the people of Manipur, but also, you know, the people of Myanmar and the Chin Hills and so on, telling them, just come here. Don't worry about anything, just make sure you get here. And certainly, I had never imagined how comfortable that accommodation would be for them and how welcomed they were. Of course, everybody wants to return home, and that will be one of the most predominant things that we will be working towards in the appeal, is giving those people the right and giving them and equipping them to be able to rebuild their lives once they return home. Meanwhile, they are together as part of a community, many of them in Mizoram, because that it has been a state of refuge. But the aim, of course, is for people to be able to go back to where they belong, and that is the state of Manipur.
And Rebecca, you went with Nan, you joined Nan on this trip to Mizoram, to the refugee camp. You returned home.
Yes, that's right. It's a very different way of returning home. Yes, as Nan has explained, there has been this problem with the Manipur, but it is fascinating to see people happy, really. There are a lot of refugee camps. Where we went is just one camp, so there were more than 40 families living there. And the day we went there is a day of advanced Christmas, so it's a really joyful occasion. Even though we hear sad stories and we spoke to them and hear their stories, very sad, it's lovely to see them happy and just to enjoy a lovely meal together, to worship the Lord and have the devotion together. Yes.
So you saw there was joy even in the midst of this terrible suffering.
Yes, we saw joy. The children were happy, feel so safe, and it's such lovely to see that.
And so from your point of view, Rebecca, I know you had opportunity to speak to some of the people there in your own language and in their language, your heart language. What was that like for you to hear firsthand these accounts?
Well, it is so powerful and sad in a way, because we hear, like Nan just said, they have minutes to flee, really. And there were elderly people that needs help, and there were children who doesn't understand anything at all. And then as they flee, the children still ask what's happening. And then looking back and seeing their villages on fire, then they come to know that it's really in that situation that they are in. So I could see children traumatized. And I spoke to one of the mothers who said that her son doesn't want to go back to the place yet because he was so scared about that experience. And she said that the son feels safe in Mizoram, so let's stay here for a while. That's the son said. So that shows us, how traumatized it is.
And so you felt you were in the presence of a group of people utterly traumatized by loss of home, loss of church, loss of life, I guess, people grieving. It must have been an overwhelming experience for you.
It was very overwhelming. So we spoke to people, and since it's the Christmas advance service, there's the worship going on at the same time. And all of a sudden, Nan and I heard this mass prayer, and we ran in, and that was the moment that was so powerful to us, to see them calling God at the top of their voice, asking God to help them. And that was such a really moving experience. You just need to cry with them at that point. Yeah.
So the mass prayer, of course, is something that happens on every Sunday in Mizoram and neighbouring states, where people literally, they pray aloud at the same time. And when you've got a gathering of 200-300 people praying at the top of their voice at the same time, that's very, very powerful. But the little I understood of the Mizo, and of course the sense of shouting out to the Lord, that you knew that was happening. But I knew that certainly affected Rebecca, because she heard it in her own language, and her own people crying out to the Lord. So that was really powerful. There was another beautiful thing that we experienced, and that moved me maybe slightly, and that was when the pastor, a guy from the Church of South India, asked us, "Can we bring the children to you?" And I thought, okay, what does that mean? And of course I said, well, Jesus himself says, "Bring the children to me so I can bless them." And that was quite powerful as well, having the children, orphaned children that had lost their parents, of course coming to us and being, having that opportunity to pray with them and to bless them. And that was very, very emotional, really. Yeah.
Yes. So now the appeal is launched. How can people give? Where can they find the details for this magnificent appeal?
Yes, well, the details, they've been sent to all our congregations, and there's a QR code, so you can literally with your smartphone take a picture of the QR code. We've also, we will receive money in whatever way people want to give that money. So as a local church, send it on to your presbytery secretary, and then the presbytery secretary will have a reference number, and with that reference number, and it will come up on your screen now, but that reference number then will be used to sort the monies out when they arrive at central office, to make sure that we know what that money is for. And I wish people well, because actually when we raise money, we can actually have fun together. I'm personally looking forward, well, I don't think I'm looking forward, but I will be soon. I'll be taking part in an ultra she marathon.
How many miles are we talking about there, Nan?
Not an awful lot of miles, really. It's 50 kilometres. And I'm not going to run it. I'll run some of it, but most of it will be walking. But, you know, I'm going with a friend. We can have a whale of a time. And, you know, I'm sure that another thing that we are going to practice is, and you can see more, there'll be a film also on our website talking about what we call the Handful of Rice collection. And that is something that the women will hope to launch as well. Coffee mornings, fancy dress parties, ultra marathons, maybe a 70s disco, you know, a bring and buy sale, whatever it might be. I'm just wishing everybody all the best, and to be assured that it will certainly mean the world to those people that need and will one day return back home to Manipur.
Nan and Rebecca, thank you very much.